we are now moving on to that large intestine. This is going to be one of our last discussions for this particular chapter. First off, we are coming through. If we were chyme, we are coming through. We've gone through the duodenum. We've gone through the jejunum. Now we're heading up to the ileum, and that ileum, in order to get past and into the large intestine, a sphincter has to open up to let us in. And that sphincter opens up in response to cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin closing the pyloric sphincter, but opening up that ileocecal sphincter. So that chyme is released into that large intestine, into the cecum. Now that we know ileum and cecum, let's break down the name of the sphincter. Ileo refers to that the beginning portion, or the thing that leads to that sphincter, is the ileum. Cecal, which refers to the cecum. Sphincter, the ileocecal sphincter. Part of that cecum has attached to it is the vermiform appendix. Not much is known as to what its role is in humans. In other primates, it has cellulase in it, meaning that it's the stuff that'll break down insoluble fiber, that the plant materials and all that. But in humans, that is absent. The only thing that we have come to a conclusion is that it has some form of immunological response, because if individuals that have had their appendixes removed, appendectomy, are more likely, or tend to more likely, get sick. It is suspected that it does have some type of role in maintaining a microbiome in a large intestine. Within our large intestine, that's right, within a large intestine, we have a lot of bacteria that are actually supporting us and helping us. They're there to help produce whatever amino acids we have left over. They often modify them. In fact, they modify them to a lot of different types of vitamins. One particular one is vitamin B12. So that intrinsic factor, when it makes it down here, induces these large intestine cells, our own cells in the large intestine, to uptake these byproducts that these bacteria are making in the form of vitamin B12 and other vitamins. Other characteristics to point out before I go ahead and just label and name these bits and pieces and portions is that there are these giant folds that are not present in the small intestine, but in the large intestine, that are called haustra. You'll also notice that it is a much wider, expansive thing, and when we get into nitty-gritty details, the surface area of this lumen of the colon, it's much smoother. It's not more folds upon folds inside of it. It's just a nice smooth surface, a much more smooth surface. So let's go ahead and follow the food. We got ourselves into the ileum, which is the last portion of the small intestine, through the ileocecal sphincter, which releases that chyme into the cecum. The large intestine will then propel it up the ascending colon, past the right colic, aka hepatic flexure, across the transverse colon, down the descending colon, through the sigmoid colon, into the rectum. Once something is in the rectum and it stretches it, it induces the defecation reflex, which then moves that fecal material into the anal canal, and, well, you dispense your fecal material out. Let's dive into the function of the colon before we go ahead and talk about it piece by piece. You have, of course, peristalsis going on, maybe a little bit of churning, aka segmentation, but you also have something called haustral churning. Remember that these are haustra right here. Because of the way that is organized, it has this loop. These liquids and contents can slosh and slop around inside. So you got that haustral churning. So haustral churning only occurs in the colon, that large intestine. You also have something called mass peristalsis. If peristalsis is moving along the inside of it, the digestive lumen, mass peristalsis is when you have conglomerated fecal material together into larger chunks, and requires a mass effort. So mass peristalsis, moving along a mass within that colon. Again, that bacteria is there to help convert proteins and amino acids and convert them into the B vitamins, which are really important for our well-being. We do remember that it has about 9.9 to 10% of the absorptive properties, most of which are in the form of water, ions, and vitamins. Finally, because of this entire process and how these bacteria interact with one another and how our large intestine absorbs certain things and specific things, we form feces. And at the end of the whole thing, we defecate out or excrete out these materials that we no longer need. Here is that lining. As I promised, you'll notice that it's not surface area upon surface area. It's actually a little bit smoother. It kind of makes sense that you don't want all those folds in this colon, as if when you are forming fecal materials, you do not want to entrap or encapsulate that fecal material or let that fecal material trap a fold, because that would be a very uncomfortable situation. Because you are forming fecal materials, and if you are absorbing a lot of water and not drinking a lot of water, those fecal materials can become abrasive. So these cells inside your colon are always multiplying and replenishing. Because of that, though, as well as you're exposing it to varying types of toxins, because you are producing these cells constantly and they're getting exposed to high concentrations of things that you don't want in your body, you're more likely to develop the cancers or tumors or all that stuff. That is why they recommend at the age of 40 or 45 that you begin having colonoscopies. Let's see here, moving on. So I had mentioned that the large intestine has a lot to do with absorbing water, ions, and vitamins. We should point out a little bit that you would think I only drink 1 cup of water a day, not a big deal. But if you think about it, you are excreting a lot of stuff out into that lumen, that digestive lumen. Saliva is being excreted out 1 liter a day. Food that you're eating is 2.3 liters a day. Gastric juices you are pouring out into your stomach or dedicating into your stomach about 2 liters a day. Bile, 1 liter. Pancreatic juices, 2 liters. Intestinal juices to help lubricate and move things along, another liter. So you are excreting 9.3 liters of liquid into that digestive tract a day. That's a lot to lose. Remembering that the small intestine absorbs about 90% of stuff, it does absorb that. But there are some things that the small intestine misses, and that large intestine is able to recoup some of that. So overall, you only lose 0.1 liters of liquids in the form of feces. The defecation reflex occurs when you begin feeling something crawling through your descending colon, your sigmoid colon, the rectum, particularly your rectum. Once it reaches the rectum, you get the defecation reflex, where the fecal material is moved out. And at this point, there you have 2 sphincters. You have at the end of it, internal anal sphincter, which is completely involuntary. You have no control over it whatsoever. You're going to notice it has some veins coursing through it. You also have an external anal sphincter, which is the one that you have mental control over. That way you can make it to the bathroom without accidentally pooing your pants. The opening that is on the superficial or your orifice is called the anus. Hemorrhoids often develop on these sphincters. If an individual is constantly producing hard stools or are constipated and dealing and suffering with it without trying to fix it, these stools can be abrasive and painful and cause the bulging up and building up of, I'm going to not quite call them polyps, but we're going to call them extensions for now, called hemorrhoids. You can have external hemorrhoids if it's on the external anal sphincter, or if it's internal hemorrhoids on the internal sphincter. These can develop large enough that they can bulge out in past the anal orifice or the anus itself. A couple of quick FYIs and then we'll be good to go. This is called the Bristol stool chart that explains the different types that you're going to be seeing often and frequently when you are a nurse to help identify different types of issues. Type 1 and type 2 is usually caused by a varying myriad of regions. Maybe it's too much, the individual's eating too much fiber and not drinking enough liquid, or they just have a genetic predisposition for it. Either way, they need to be start drinking more liquids more often, or eating the appropriate foods to help them pass things along. Type 3 and type 4 is the ones that a healthy individual will be aiming for. Type 5, 6, and 7. 5 is usually the soft blobs. It's if you're taking an anti-constipation medicine as in the form of soluble fiber, they will often coming out in the form of type 5. 6 and 7, you're actually starting to get sick. 7 is usually, especially if it's the yellow, refers to some type of sickness. Maybe you have way too much fat in your diets, things like that. Finally, another FYI is the colors of the Pubo. I love that. I made that one up. I'm so proud of myself. You got different types of colors that you're going to see. We're going to start off down in the brown section. Everyone's familiar with this color. It's a nice brown color. That's your bile salts start off a little bit of a green color, which a lot of parents that come into a general practitioner or they come into their pediatrician go, "Oh no, my newborn child has a green poo." The doctor just chuckles a little bit and says, "It's okay, that's natural." The baby is actually hasn't gotten its own perfectly established bacterial culture to process the bile salts that would give it that green color. So everything is a-okay, especially, and if we get a little bit of a green color, that's a-okay too. If it does come out like super green though, and you're an adult, then we've got some issues. Maybe you're eating way too many greens. The chlorophyll color that's there will give it a nice green color, but if you're not eating greens and it comes out green, well, that suggests your peristalsis is really, really working well, and it's not letting the digestion of the bile acids to occur, and it comes out. I'm going to skip the black one. I'm going to go to the red one the yellow one. Yellow one is suggestive that you're eating way too much fat or you're not absorbing things very well. Celiac is a disease that would be one that affects. What happens with celiac or Crohn's is that the inflammation inflames that small intestine, decreasing the surface area and making it very smooth. You decrease that surface area, you decrease its ability to absorb as much as it can. Hence why it will come out because in this yellow color, because your small intestines and large intestines don't get a chance to absorb it as much. Red is indicative that you've probably eaten a lot of food dye, but if it's on the outside of that stool, then you probably have hemorrhoids or some bleeding in your lower digestive system, your lower intestine. If it comes out white, then your bile duct is blocked. If it comes out black, let's hope that you've eaten a lot of licorice or iron supplements or some type of bismuth. Because if you haven't been, then most likely what's happening is in your upper intestinal tract you are seeing some bleeding and that your blood is being digested. With that, that is the end of our discussion of all of this wonderfulness that is the digestive tract. Thank you very much for your time and good luck.